I think one of the reasons we're asked to give these presentations is because both Ted and I focus our research on ways of improving instruction. So we're both teachers, as I'm sure all of you are, and we're scientific researchers, as I'm sure all of you are. But our research focuses on ways of improving instruction. And so we're always looking for innovative ideas from our faculty that we can validate and then hopefully generalize across Peabody College to other courses, and then hopefully across the street as well, and share what we know at Peabody with the rest of Vanderbilt. And that's really the point of having these improvement grants, is to provide the financial means and the resources necessary. So let me tell you about what we're going to talk about today for the next hour. A program overview. So it's really a lot of the information that's already on the one-page request for proposals that I'm sure you've all seen and have read through carefully. But as we kind of go through the elements of it, Ted and I will kind of go back and forth in this conversational banter that we like to share, just kind of telling you a little bit of what our insight is into what those points are. Talk about the submission content, so what do we actually want to see in the written document, do's and don'ts, almost like my wife who reads Glamour, and this section called do's and don'ts. All right, so it's fashion stuff. And then I actually wrote up a proposal, which I think got handed out, or will be handed out, of what instructional improvement grant I thought about submitting. I probably thought about it several times. So I just kind of wrote up a proposal that I think is pretty good, although I'm sure plenty of you could give me some feedback on spelling, grammar, punctuation, and the research design, all the rest. But at least it's something that we can take a look at as a framework for our conversation. So let's just go through the nuts and bolts of the program itself. There are awards of up to $10,000, but the expected award is somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000. The timeline for this particular round will be a submission to your department chair. By November 4th, your department chair will review it, determine whether or not it's meritorious, provide feedback to you, and then write a cover letter and submit it to the committee. The award announcements will happen at the end of this semester, December 2nd, right in time for finals. You'll find out, and the funds come immediately following in the spring semester. Just with respect to timelines, there is a brief report that is expected to be submitted 1 year following when you receive the funds. So you'll know pretty quickly. So there's a quick review cycle. And there's actually an opportunity too, just to let you know, this is where I'll sort of editorialize. Oftentimes the committee will receive proposals, and then sometimes there's a sort of request for resubmission with some modifications. So that's kind of taken into consideration as well. It's not like you see it stamped, accepted, or rejected, and you just get the bad news. It's more like, hey, this is a great proposal. Please resubmit with some clarification on these points. So it really is intended to be sort of a collaborative, supportive. We want great proposals to come in, as opposed to we're just looking to reject everything that comes across the transom.
Who here might submit this next round? You have 1, 2, 3? Oh, good. Okay.
Well, come on, y'all.
Sure, why not?
It's all kinds of time. This is what it's all about, to support initiatives to improve the quality of instruction in one or more areas of undergraduate or graduate level. Bottom line, is what you're proposing research that will ultimately improve classroom instruction, teaching and learning, how much your undergrads and grad students know, or facilitate more effective, more accessible instruction on your part. To encourage the development and demonstration of instructional innovations that can be replicated throughout Peabody College. The big word is replicated. This is what I say to my students. Circle that, it's going to be on the midterm. That'll work out. And really, we're looking for things that are not idiosyncratic, one-time things. We're looking for things that could be generalized across different courses, hopefully across departments, and maybe even colleges. Preference will be given to those who have not previously received an award. So if you haven't received an award, then you move right to the front of the line in terms of review.
Just a question about the replication.
Yeah.
So, like a lot of our courses in education and practicums associated with them,
right.
But a lot of them don't, and also a lot across the street, they probably wouldn't. So would thinking about different ways to creatively think about the practicum
Sure.
be counted as replicable?
Right. So I would expect that you could say that a practicum I was in the Department of Teaching and Learning. There is a practica over there. There's some in special ed. Even in counseling programs, there's ways where people go out and practice what they do in kind of a more professional setting. So anytime that you see something like that, I would consider it to be reasonably generalizable to those other settings.
Yep, I would agree.
Thanks, Ted.
Good.
All right. Eligibility, all full-time faculty may apply. Group applications are encouraged. So I think someone here was a grad student. They said, could I sit in on this? We'd love to have grad students come in. I think we're looking for a sponsoring faculty member, maybe your advisor. You can do all the work. But we would like to see a faculty member be the principal investigator. Preference will be given to projects that incorporate instructional strategies or techniques not already in use at Peabody. So if you're doing something that's novel or new, that's great, it's preferred. Lend themselves to replication or adaptation in other Peabody programs. And again, the goal is obviously for you to improve your instruction, but for you to learn things that will help other people to improve their instruction as well. And very importantly, include an assessment of the effectiveness of the innovation. So this is kind of typical button-down scientific research. What are your dependent variables? It could be qualitative or it could be quantitative, but ultimately, how do you know you got what you wanted? What was your objective for this? You want your students to be happier with you? That's fine. Just find a way of evaluating that in a very systematic way. And if one goal for your instruction is to improve student satisfaction, which you believe then lends itself to more engagement and ultimately better academic achievement, those are all fine things. It's a broad range of educational outcomes that we would consider to be reasonable. Just find a way of evaluating it to determine what the effects are, the magnitude, if you want to go quantitative with effect sizes, and if there are any unintended consequences of innovations. Right? Sometimes we want to introduce technologies into the classroom, and sometimes they cause more trouble than they're worth. So that might be something you might think about. Bring iPads into the classroom. Might be interesting. Facebook time. All right, describe the goals of the proposed innovation and what will be accomplished by the project. Very straightforward. So there's actually, and maybe you saw it in the proposed, the grant proposal I put together. But whenever I write grant proposals to the National Science Foundation or whoever, I take a look at what their sections are, and I basically write straight into them. And so in this request for proposal, there's a request for what are the goals of the project and what will be accomplished. Bullet points are great, I think. It just kind of states specifically what you're trying to accomplish. Describe specifically in a single paragraph what the monies will be provided, what the monies will provide to those involved in the project. So how are you going to use the money? And again, I think of bullet points. I'm going to use it for graduate assistant. I'm going to buy some hardware. I'm going to go to a conference. And it's probably going to cost this much. Bottom line, this is how much money I need to get from you. So straightforward, precise, concise budget. So how does your innovation integrate with the curriculum? So your example, for instance, was in a practicum. So there might be something interesting about how the technology or the innovation, and sometimes we say the word technology in our presentation, but I think of technology, instructional technology, as any tools or techniques. So sometimes techniques are just the ways that you speak to people, or the ways that you organize things. It doesn't have to be a computer or some sort of magical hardware device. How does it fit in with the curriculum of the department? Describe the potential impact of the proposed instructional innovation. Could be at the level of the learner, level of the department, level of the university. Global impact, possibly.
Andy,
Yes.
question. Do you see this as being appropriate for, at the programmatic level, where what you're trying to do is greater integration, maybe across 2 or 3 different separate classes within a singular curriculum? Program
I'd have to
curriculum.
know.
Is this appropriate for that?
It could be.
Can you say more about?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'd have to know more before I could hear
Okay, well, let me give you an example. Within the CDA program, what we've been trying to do, there are 3 particular classes that are required the first semester. And what we've been trying to do is build the curriculum to specifically for some redundancies. And to pull it together in ways that students can see that first semester, the integration of the curriculum. But there's still more work to do there, and so I was wondering if that might be.
I think one way to answer the question is to ask one back. How would the folks in special ed benefit from your research?
Well,
Because I think the idea is you're developing some new innovation that's going to improve instruction. I get it. I can see how integration within a curriculum and making sure there's planned redundancy or reviews built in is a good idea. If you were to describe your project as a generalized approach for curricular strands, that creates a framework where we have planned redundancy or reviews built in, because research indicates, for instance, that spaced review and rehearsal helps to improve long-term retention, generalizability, and transfer of learning. I'm kind of talking off the top of my head here. Then that kind of makes sense both for an individual within a class, but also for an individual across multiple courses. And if you're saying this is what research tells us, yet whenever we design curricular strands in our programs, we kind of forget that. You know, Ted teaches the class and I teach the class, and we feel like we're doing a great job working together. If I don't cover his material, he doesn't cover mine. But imagine if we said, hey, how can I leverage what you're doing, build a little bit of overlap in, and have students build upon that? That's pretty neat. And imagine if we developed a framework where we could apply that in different programs. And one example would be CDA. So here's our general idea, here's one program, here's what we saw previously, here's the benefit of outcomes, and now I go over to your department and I say, hey, this is something you guys might consider doing as well. Okay. Yeah.
I'm not familiar with this particular offering, but have you done this before? Like, is this a new grant? Or?
No, the instructional improvement grants have been around for several years.
Okay.
How do you know when the first?
Well, I've been on the panel for at least 3 or 4 years, so I know, and I think they were going on before that.
I think they've gone on at least for a decade.
Yeah.
Right. Well, here's a question in the past years. What sort of counterfactual have people used when they're assessing the impacts of what they've done? Have they used other, for example, other class sections with prior year outcomes on similar measures?
Sure.
Or related courses taught in other departments? Or?
Yeah, so you're talking about in the research design, what would we use as our
you're
comparison
only
group?
teaching maybe one class, so
Right.
So you know, and splitting a class into pieces is
Yeah.
not always easy. So
Right. Yeah, and this is what's fun about research design, isn't it? How do we create the strongest evidence?
Yeah, it's more of a research and development effort. Also, the counterfactual evidence, control evidence is pretty basal. We want people to be able to show with reasonable metrics that something has changed and that's consistent with their instructional plan.
okay, so you could even use like a within subjects design, just look at your.
Not necessarily. It's really more. This is really more of a orientation towards practice and improving practice in a real small scale that would be disseminable around Peabody and universities.
All right.
Yeah, no experimental designs necessarily.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, not necessarily,
But you certainly could.
but I
could, right.
you, so this is one of the things. I think the nature of the question you ask kind of lends itself to the type of research design that you would want to use. So
Right.
whether it's single subject within subject,
Yeah.
or you did a group experimental, or you wanted to play some other approach. I think as long as you felt like you could say to your colleagues and to everyone else that when I did this thing,
Yeah.
we got these results. And I'm pretty confident that this is what caused those results.
Right.
And that's kind of the kind of argument we're looking for. And there's obviously, we know there's strong evidence for that, there's
Right.
less strong. And
Okay.
yeah,
Thank you.
I think there's a lot of flexibility in the committee or the panel for reviewing that. So list the activities and the timeline for accomplishing the project. You get all fancy, put together a Gantt chart if you wanted, or when I put together my proposal was just banged it out in Microsoft Word and said on a quarter by quarter, month by month basis, kind of here's what's going to happen in this particular order, the sequence. And here's the timeline for it, who's going to be responsible for it. In my proposal, I think I was the principal investigator, and I have some graduate assistants who are going to be helping me out. I'm working with an undergraduate who's working with me as part of fulfilling requirements for a honors program. So I think it's kind of good to mention things like that. Who's going to do the work? It's much more rigorous when you submit it to the National Science Foundation. You know, what's the bios, and who's going to do what, and what evidence have they shown for success in doing that in the past. A little bit lighter there, but who's doing what? And as noted in the request for proposal, do be realistic about your timeline because end date extensions will be unlikely. So try to get things done by when you said or ahead of time would always be nice. The budget is really simple. I think I had 3 lines for mine. My proposal. Listen by categories, so I think I did mine by I need some equipment, graduate assistants, and I had some travel for a conference. Boom, boom, boom. And underneath hardware you might have, I need a laptop, I need a projector, I need pencils, I need, you know, you could just list it out as line items and put an estimated value in there. One question I have is, suppose I don't know exactly how much stuff is going to cost. What do we do on that, Greg?
Ask your local service provider, your LSP in your
Yeah.
department, or email Ralph Knapp
Yeah.
at PTSC. they're there to help provide that information for you.
Yeah. So if I'm going to purchase 10 iPads for some reason, what's the current price, what's the tax, kind of put together basically a quote on that item and put that in. Teach proposed expenditures, the specific project activity, explain why the expenditure is needed. That's pretty straightforward. Summer salaries may not be funded through this grant. So that's just.
Let me say one thing about it, but sometimes it seems like the budget and the narrative are not related. I mean, for some reason, it's like things get in there that seem to have no relevance at all to what they proposed. So make sure you tie those things together, because that's all we've got to go on in terms of the budget stuff.
Yeah, there's a nice section called do's and don'ts where we'll be talking about that, but you're right, that's one where this was written specifically because it's not always apparent. There's a line item in the budget saying this is what we need, and then the review panel is looking through it, trying to fill in the blanks, like where did that come from?
Right.
I guess you could use it for this reason, but I'm not sure why. And whenever the panel has to start guessing at things, that's where things start to spin out a little bit. And then maybe that's where a request for resubmission. What is this line item really going to be used for? Just ask for clarification. Dissemination, this is big. I'm getting back to, again, the whole point of this is once you've developed this really cool innovation, something that you think will help you to teach in coming semesters, and other people, how are you going to let them know about it? So of course the old standard would be to publish an article on it, but the standards for this particular grant are not that high. It might be, I'd like to do a brown bag lunch, similar to the one that we're doing right now, that Craig would set up with his staff, and have a lot of people in, and you can do a presentation. There's also the Center for Teaching, which does programs like this. You can also take it upon yourself to go across the street and give a presentation at whatever department that you might have connections with. But some idea of how you're going to get this out. How are people going to learn about this cool innovation that the university paid for, and you were able to demonstrate. So how are you going to go about doing it? Submit an electronic version to Craig Kennedy by November 4th, and provide a copy to your department chair. You'll be notified about the outcome of your application via email. Your final report is due at the completion of the project 1 year later, and Craig is the man. If you have questions, you know where to find his office. So he is the final authority on all of these things, and the locus of information.
If it's not funded, it's his fault.
Right.
Not the committee.
Not the committees.
Yeah. I don't know anything about it. Do you want to take over here?
Sure. Yeah.
It has to bring news down?
Yeah, there are a number of things that will either get, more likelihood it will get funded, or make sure it won't get funded. So let's talk about some of those. The first thing is make sure you're clear, concise, and direct. And Andy already said this. You will get, the outline for the grant. Please write to that outline. Okay, so it's easy to kind of almost fill in the blanks. And as you'll see in Andy's example, it doesn't have to be 20 pages. I mean, you can do it in 4 or 5 pages. We are always interested in innovative technology components to proven ideas. So, you've got, here's something that we know works, but we think by bringing technology in, we can even enhance that. We can leverage what we're doing. And a lot of people have done very nicely with that. We've seen a lot of nice proposals over the years where new technologies are brought in. And as Andy said, it's not always hard technology that we're talking about, but instructional technologies as well. And then lastly, a clear evaluation plan, because we want to know how you're going to demonstrate that, in fact, this does make a difference. And Andy's talked about a little bit that already. Okay, here are the don'ts.
Yeah, one last.
Yeah.
And with respect to the evaluation plan, if I was trying to convince some other department or some of my colleagues to try out this cool innovation that I'm very excited about, I would expect them, especially in this venue, to say, that sounds great, but how do I know it works, and how well does it work? What's the magnitude of the effect that I can expect from this, or what are the outcomes? And the more evidence I have to present that, the easier it will be to convince them. So I guess I'm the ultimate skeptic when somebody comes in with a new instructional innovation. I'll say, that sounds really cool, and intuitively it appeals to me, but what kind of impact am I expecting to see? So if you build that into a proposal as part of the evaluation, I think that lends itself to more widespread dissemination, because people will buy into it.
Yeah. This first was really important because we've seen this happen a number of times. Anytime there's a new technology, it seems like it shows up in a proposal. Like you know, we're going to buy 50 new iPads, give them to the students and see what happens, okay? It doesn't work, all right? Or flip cameras. I remember we had one about flip cameras where we're going to give every student a flip camera and see what happens. Well, that's not what we're looking for. We're really looking for, you know, what is the intended outcome, and is there a technology that might help you do that? So it's really not, you know, a way to buy new technology and just, you know, disseminate it to students or to faculty. And as Andy already said, you know, don't expect us to fill in the blanks, which we often feel that that's what we're doing. We're trying to figure out what the intent was. It's not often clear, and there's often a disconnect between the narration and the budget. And we're trying to figure out what, you know, why are they asking for this when in the proposal it doesn't say anything about that. So the more concise and clear you can be, the better it is, because we're not mind readers. And that's the bottom line there. Don't request funding that doesn't fit the grant guidelines. And we've seen everything over the years. I mean, you know, international travel, which had nothing to do with what, you know, well, what we thought was the intent of the grant, or some of the other things. I don't know. We've seen pizzas for everybody in the department or something. I mean, seriously, we've seen everything over the years. So make sure that that budget is tied directly to that narrative, and there's a reason for what you do. So those are the big do's and don'ts that we've seen over the years. So
I'd say that it's this last one that's the one that's most vexing, I think. Is
yeah.
You get an idea that this is a really interesting piece of research. It might be an evaluation program of a nonprofit that's related to a community development program. That sounds really cool, and the evaluation sounds very rigorous, and it sounds like it might be very interesting. But I'm not really sure what that has to do with instructional improvement at Peabody College. Or the one about international travel, because I'm doing some research, I want to write a book, and it relates to some education-related topic. And again, I think that's very worthwhile research. It's scholarly, there's no doubt about it.
Right.
But I'm not sure how that relates to helping improve instructional practice, teaching and learning in our classrooms. And the question that I asked Linda, you know, would be another question and say, so this sounds great, I understand what you're doing. How's that going to benefit psych and human development? So I'm a teacher that's teaching a course in something else. How are they going to benefit from this cool new thing that you learned about?
It's not to say that international travel couldn't be relevant, but
right.
It needs to be justified well, all right, if you're going to do that. What else do we have? Oh, the proposal, the sample proposal we got. Are you going to go over that for them?
Yeah, for just a few minutes.
All right.
I think it'd be...
Do you have, before we do that, do you have questions that we might answer about the review process or anything like that? Yeah.
So if you submitted a grant and it doesn't get funded, is there any way, like, not like substantial feedback, but is there any way that you could just say useless, don't ever submit again, or like close, like whatever the like, because it comes back with no feedback whatsoever, or at least the one that I submitted previously, and so I was just wondering if there would be any way to like just say possible or not possible, or like, or which one of these don'ts, you know, not like in a sentence even, but like which not replicable or not, you know, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think that you should absolutely receive that kind of feedback, and I appreciate you saying that if it's never going to get funded, we'll probably find, or the panel will find some euphemistic way of saying it, but saying this is really not the intent of this particular grant.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a fancy way of saying it.
Right, right.
Like I know you guys are busy.
Yeah, just let me know, and I'll move on to the next one. Yeah, I think that's perfectly fair. So that's one thing I think that the committee will commit to, is providing more substantial feedback moving forward, so you know whether to resubmit or you know how to submit the next idea, because you guys are going to come up with ideas all the time. Knowing how this next idea would be better than the one you submitted previously, you'd be more successful. Yeah, that's perfectly fair.
I thought we'd always tried to give that kind of feedback, so maybe we failed in our attempts.
I like literally got no.
All right,
I
well,
mean, there was like, but I mean, that just could have been the way.
maybe the feedback sheet was separated from the rest of
Yeah,
the stuff.
well, there you go. If anybody finds it, pass it on.
Anyway, sorry about that.
Okay.
Yes.
Do we have to show sustainability of the instructional innovation? For example, I'm thinking about proposing a way to develop an alternative practicum arrangement, because we can't fulfill all of our practicum needs at the local school district. And I want to pilot it to see if it's going to work, and then I think I have ways to make it more sustainable in the future. We work with community organizations and other things. And do I have to show that I mean, obviously I can only get funding for that one semester.
Right.
Do I have to show that, that, okay, I'm gonna get funding, if it's successful, I'll get funding from these other sources for it to be sustainable in the future, or?
No, and, I mean, that would be great if you could do that, but.
Well, that's just kind of a wish.
Yeah, that's not the intent. And again, like any research proposal, I mean, as we review these, we look, is this a good idea? Are we willing to bet on the fact that this is worth spending, you know, X number of dollars to do that? There's no guarantee that it will, you know, it'll happen, but, so I don't think you know, can guarantee that there's sustainability either, so. I mean, if it's a good idea, I mean, we want to fund it and test that out, so.
Right, and I think ultimately what you'd say is, with respect to this type of practicum in this community, this is the innovative approach that we're taking to it. Here's the outcomes that we produced at a cost of $5,000. And so you could go to someone else and say, oh, you know, I know that you're doing a practicum in the Department of Teaching and Learning. You could do something similar. Now the cost is $5,000. I don't know where you can get the money from, but we know that this particular outcome comes at this particular cost.
Right.
And it's not your responsibility to say where you're going to get the money the next year, the year after, or where somebody else might. Does that make sense? Yeah. I just think it's a technology.
Yeah.
What about learning, I'm focusing on arts education, and come from a professional artist background, but I'm doing independent study with people from Blair. So figuring out some way to bring educators and professional artists together in terms of evaluating what learning. And so I guess I'm thinking, how would I integrate something that's maybe somewhat outside of Peabody College in using, does that make sense?
Yeah, but the instruction is within Peabody.
Right, right, but being able to access and use professors.
Yeah, I don't see that as being a problem at all. And even within Peabody, I don't think we've ever had a cross-departmental proposal, but I mean, that would be a good idea too. I mean, what we really want to do is see these innovations spread across Peabody.
Yeah, that would be, you would present an argument that one benefit of this form of college collaboration is a greater opportunity for dissemination of results, which would be great.
That's exactly what.
And also maybe helps to argue for generalizability of results. You know, this works over here at Peabody with this type of student, and also works at Blair with that type of student. I think that's actually a positive.
You want to go with the proposal?
Yeah, I'll just do it real fast. I mean, I just, is there one?
There's 30 left.
There's
one back
Let me
there.
just grab one for that. All right, so let me tell you where this instructional improvement idea came from. Grading papers is a pain in the butt. Anyone with me on that? It just takes a long time. And I teach a research methods course, qualitative and quantitative research methods to undergraduates, and I have 180 students this semester across 2 sections. And coming up on November 18th, I'm going to receive 180 10-page lit reviews. And I grade on spelling, grammar, and punctuation, APA formatting, clarity of thought, and depth of analysis. 10, 20, 30, 40% of the grade. So spelling, grammar, and punctuation is not important as analysis, but I grade on it. I mean, I just can't, I come to a screeching halt at a misspelled word or a misplaced comma. And I know that the more feedback I can provide to my students, the better they're going to learn. But the crazy trade-off is the more I ask from them, the more I have to give to them. So I'm thinking, how can I provide more feedback of higher quality and take less time? Because I'm my daughter's soccer coach and my son's band leader. So that's really kind of the problem. So whenever I think about instructional improvement grants or I think about this kind of stuff is, how can I make something better? So I'm familiar with this technology from LiveScribe. It's a LiveScribe digital pen. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a cutting edge technology, but I'll explain to you why. It's not the technology per se, it's kind of what it does that makes it more powerful. So when you write on paper, it records everything that you write and digitizes it, and it synchronizes it with whatever you're saying. So I could be in class taking econ from Buckles, he's talking a mile a minute, I can't keep up with my note taking, so I just write down a few words, and then later on I tap in my notes and it plays back the recording from that moment. So I just posted a pencast for my midterm review session for my students. I went over the midterm, I'm going over each of the items on the review sheet, and I'm talking really fast. I post a PDF file, they open it up, they see the review sheet, and when they click on the little check mark next to item 12, it plays back the recording of me talking about item 12. So that's what the technology does, ink and audio recording. But here's what I want to use it for. So you submit your paper to me, I print it out, I take it home, I sit at the kitchen table late at night, after I kiss my wife, my kids goodnight, I sit there and I start grading papers. And what I want to be able to do is to write some comments, because sometimes it's easier to make basic mechanical, make comments with respect to mechanics by handwriting, and then with respect to higher order conceptual thinking, I just want to speak my comment like I might do during office hours. So what I can do with a pen is I circle a sentence, and I tap it, I'm in the record mode, and I say, Ted, you know, you make a really great point here, but whenever you make a statement of fact like this, you need to provide a citation. Beep. And that recording has been captured, and then when I send him the PDF file, he'll see the circle, and when he clicks on it, he'll hear my voice. So the cool thing about this, and this is what the literature tells us, you know, I wouldn't say that I'm the one to innovate this idea of providing spoken feedback via recording. Other people have done it with tape recorders, they've done it with podcasting. Here's a pen. It's not really the technology per se, but it's the fact that I can talk 10 times faster than I can write. So in the same amount of time, I can provide a lot more feedback. I don't know if you're like me, but you know, you get to paper number 30, and sometimes you just write down awkward. Right? The student looks at it, and they, A, I can't read his handwriting, and B, what's awkward? But instead, I can say, you know, I'm really a little bit confused by this, Ted. I'm not sure if you're suggesting that technologies always are successful or always are when they're implemented with fidelity. Think. And so what I want to do is develop a technology leveraging a commercial product, LifeScript Smart Pen, that I can use to grade papers. And what I'm suggesting in my proposal is, listen, I'm in HOD, grading lit reviews, but you could be in special ed, you could be in teaching and learning, you could be in Blair School of Music, you could be anywhere on campus, and anyone who has to grade papers could use this innovation. So that's kind of what the problem is and what the proposed solution is. So I kind of start off with a little overview, talking about how life is miserable for professors. I go into, this is what it would look like, with a handy little diagram. You see the undergraduate at the top of the page, thing. I actually have a link to a document that you can click on and take a look at and say, oh, I see what this would look and sound like. On page 2, I jump into my little mini lit review, just to tell you and to tell the reviewers that this is not some grand invention. It's been done before, and when it's been done, the results seen by others are tremendous. For instance, ICE, second paragraph, found that professors provided 2.5 times more information by word count when they spoke their feedback than when they typed it. And it took them 1/4 of the time. That's a 10x improvement in efficiency. So if I could tell you, you could grade papers 10 times faster and provide higher quality feedback, I think people would be interested in that. It turns out students like them more. Because instead of seeing just words like awkward and more, question mark, and I'm confused, they might get more positive feedback. So I did a little review of the literature to say, hey, listen, it's been done before. I've learned from what other people have done. I'm going to stand on the shoulders of giants. Based on this review of literature, here's my hypotheses. And I list them out 1 through 5. Someday when I do my little research report, I'm probably going to list them out again and say, here's what my findings were. I think professors will provide more feedback. It'll take them less time. I think they're going to provide more higher level conceptual comments and less mechanical stuff. More positive feedback, which I think causes students, and again, I didn't have room in this literature review, but when you intersperse positive comments with constructive criticism, students hang in there longer and read more comments, as opposed to like negative, 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 put the paper away. So if you go negative, negative, positive, negative, negative, positive, I'm sure there's some sort of variable ratio reinforcement schedule going on there. Both students and professors will prefer it, so I'm going to do a qualitative component. I have my goals and objectives. There are many objections, I'm sure. At the very bottom of page 2, use of funding. This is what I need. I need to buy 12 of these pens with a little recording headsets. I need 2 grad students for a total of 80 hours. And I'd like to present the results of my findings at a conference, either AERA or ISTE. Haven't decided which one. How's it going to integrate with the curriculum? Basically, it'll work with anything that can be printed. So this thing is cross-curricular in terms of its application. Its potential impact is myriad. It could have a big impact on teaching of all kinds. And here's what I'm going to do. So this fall, actually, this semester, I'm conducting a pilot study where I'm kind of making sure the thing even works. Right? And I know it does, sort of, but I kind of want to make sure that it works when I have TAs doing grading, I want to understand what I have to train them to do. I want to collect some very, very loose qualitative information about what the outcomes are so I can develop more refined measures when I do the real thing. And ultimately, this particular proposal could be the pilot for a full-blown NSF proposal. I know that when I've submitted NSF proposals previously, they say, what is some evidence to suggest that this is going to actually work? And sometimes you can rely upon a lit review, but oftentimes they want to see pilot study data. So this is a stepping stone to something that could be larger. So I just went through with this fall semester kind of month by month. Basically, November means I got to do it pretty quick. December means I'm going to put it off for a little while. Then in the spring semester is when the action occurs. The summer is when, even though I'm not getting paid for it, I'm going to analyze and write up the results. Here's part of my dissemination plan is I've picked out a couple of journals that I think would be amenable to publishing an article like this. I'm sure somebody around here cares about impact factor, so I want to be published in journals that are recognized as being reputable. I'm going to submit a paper to one of those conferences, haven't decided which one. Maybe it depends on which city they're in. I like Atlanta more than Texas, I'm not sure. Right? Not gonna lie. And then there's the potential for, and I specify directly which NSF research program I would actually submit it to. So it kind of shows a little bit of foresight into which direction I'm going. Then I want to come back, I want to disseminate it through the Fantastic Pro office. Could use Vanderbilt News Service. I use them very successfully. These guys are great, like Melanie Marina. Do you know her?
Yep.
So I did this NSF project to help help blind students out, make sense of graphical representations. You know, if you're taking a calculus class and you're a blind kid, like how do you make sense of the diagram? And I got an NSF grant for it. And I just went over and said, oh, here's the thing I'm doing, give them a little demo. You wrote this article and got picked up by everybody under the sun. And then it got picked up by MSNBC and all, you know, IEEE Spectrum and all these other places. So if you really want to get your results out and leverage the resources that are available at Vanderbilt, I would look at our media office. They're awesome. 1 year after I received my grant, a little bit before, because I worked toward deadlines, I submitted a final report, which will probably be a structured abstract, like a nice one-page structured abstract with probably the PowerPoint presentation that I delivered through the brown bag set. And then if I submit a paper for publication, obviously that would be the thing. My budget is, for this one, is $4,560, which kind of falls within the range of 5 to 6. I guess I could have asked for more, but I don't really need more. And this is what it's for. You can see I have, I use the ISH. I need 12 pens that are going to cost about $1,200. Put a little bio in there, but it would be nice if you attached a Vita, CV would be nice. And then of course our reference section. So this 5-page thing, I need to admit this. I probably spent 5 or 6 hours writing up. I know I'd like to say it took longer or it took shorter. I don't know what your expectations are. It took me a little bit of time to put it together. But I think it's relatively modest compared to what we have to do for the full-blown grants. But this is kind of how I thought I would submit a grant. Now, if Ted and other panel members reviewed it, you might give me some feedback and said, you know, your assessment plan is a little bit light, or I don't know what your feedback would be. But this is at least one.
Is there an assessment plan in this?
Yeah, I mean, what I said for
What is the
this,
assessment?
I went into specifically what my hypotheses would be, 1 through 5. They can provide more feedback to the students through speech and writing alone.
Okay, so you don't have to say like how you're going to do that. You don't have to say like,
I'm going to collect
I'm
this
going to,
data.
you know, collect this,
Yeah.
I'm going to, you know, use 150 students and out of my sections of whatever, and collect 2
Yeah.
different papers across the semester or blah, blah, blah.
I didn't. I don't know. What would you say, Ted?
Well,
to this proposal?
You can, I don't think, you know, it has to be that detailed.
So broad strokes is fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I were really going to crank it up, I would say that would probably be the next step where I say, I'm going to use Ashlock's instrument, which can be found in Mental Measurements Yearbook. And I'll randomly assign, you know, an equal number of students to 2 conditions, and I'll do a pre-test which measures these things. I mean, I think there's a little bit of an expectation that you guys kind of know how to do this sort of stuff. But I think where we've found problems before is when there's absolutely no indication whatsoever about what educational outcome you're expecting, or even how one might measure. We kind of look through the proposal and just go, I don't know where this is going. Are the kids going to be happier? Are they going to be faster or stronger, smarter, or what's going to happen? So some indication of what those dependent measures are, and then maybe some reliance upon the fact that you guys kind of know your business. that fair?
That's good,
All
yeah.
right, I don't want to sound defensive there, that I didn't have more information.
No, that was great, thank you.
So what Craig has asked me to do is to send to him PDF files for both the presentation and for this final proposal. Maybe I'll send it to you in Word also. I mean, you're welcome to use it whatever way you want as a reference. I think there's a lot of other ways you could submit a proposal, so it's not like if it's not in this framework, then Andy's not going to like it, like somebody's not going to like it. I think there's just a lot of ways, but you'll notice that this almost slavishly follows some of the criteria listed in the request for proposals. And that again makes it easier for the reviewers. And you go down and say, does it meet this criteria? Yes. In fact, at the very end of the bio, I said, just to show you, I made sure a sentence. Andy has not previously received financial support through the Instructional Improvement Grant Program. Because that's one of the criteria. Preference will be given to. So make sure that whatever those sentences are, somewhere within that document, that's a nice little checkoff item.